Right now on Morning News Now, America's deportation debate taking center stage in the Oval Office during a visit from El Salvador's president. This after the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of a man in Maryland mistakenly deported to a mega prison in his home country.
How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country?
We have team coverage as the controversy grows. Also, trading game this morning renewed fears about America's economy. President Trump signaling new plans to impose tariffs on pharmaceutical drugs and computer chips. Now Wall Street bracing for another up and down day. We'll bring you the latest. Plus, history of hate. New information about the man now charged in the arson attack at the home of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. But we're learning about a possible motive, plus the suspicious social media posts allegedly made by the suspect. And money on the mind. Today is tax day, and paired with the recent economic headlines, you might be feeling some financial anxiety. You are certainly not alone. We're going to share some ways to help you deal with the stress. Hopefully you have those taxes filed by now on this April 15th. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah Sellers today.
We begin this morning with the president of El Salvador's headline-making visit to the White House yesterday. President Nayib Bukele met with President Trump in the Oval Office. There he told reporters he would not return Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Maryland man the Justice Department says was mistakenly deported to El Salvador.
How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Well, the United States has sent hundreds of deportees to El Salvador, Bukele incarcerating them in a notorious mega prison there. Among them is Abrego Garcia. A Justice Department prosecutor said he was deported because of an administrative error. But the Trump administration accuses Abrego Garcia of being a member of MS-13, a violent gang the White House has designated as a foreign terrorist organization. His family denies this, and Abrego Garcia has never been charged criminally. We'll speak with an NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos, here on the legal issues involved in all of this. But first, let's get to White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who joins us from Washington with the latest on this. Vaughn, good morning to you. So walk us through the Trump administration meeting with El Salvador's President Bukele yesterday and how Abrego Garcia is responding to their comments.
Right, I'll let Danny get into the legal there because there's a lot of legalese to this here. But essentially yesterday, the question coming into this meeting with the El Salvador President Bukele was whether the United States, whether the White House, whether President Trump would request Kilmar Abrego Garcia be returned to United States custody, as last week the Supreme Court directed the White House to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the United States. Of course, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was one of hundreds that were deported to the mega prison system here, and it has caused a lot of concern about the lack of judicial review before sending Abrego Garcia overseas to a mega prison with a long history of human rights abuses and, frankly, a prison system that is not mere that of the standards that the United States uses to imprison and incarcerate individuals who have been convicted of crimes here in the U.S. And so that is where Abrego Garcia's wife yesterday outside the White House said that the Bukele and Trump continue to play political games. And it was just notable there inside of the Oval Office yesterday, the fact that the Attorney General, the Vice President, the Secretary of State, nor the President, all with Bukele sitting right there, did not make the explicit request to follow the orders of the Supreme Court and have him returned. Instead, you heard there Bukele suggesting, well, he can't do that because he would be then sending him back to the United States when he is initially a citizen of El Salvador.
So, Vaughn, let's listen to some of what Trump was heard saying to Bukele on an unofficial live stream by the Salvadorian Presidential Party. It was about deporting more people, appearing to include American citizens.
Criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrown's are next. The homegrown's built. You got to build about 5 more places.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right.
Critics have pointed out that is probably highly illegal there, but the two leaders appear very close, joking and laughing. What does this alliance with El Salvador mean for Trump's deportation ambitions? Were any specific agreements reached?
Right. He was suggesting sending homegrown or U.S.-born citizens to El Salvador to be imprisoned. And the president went on to say that these would be violent criminals. Yet, of course, that is outside the norm for the U.S. to send away U.S. citizens outside of the country. And this comes at a time in which he is essentially acting as an affront to the Supreme Court's request to have Abrego Garcia, a non-U.S. citizen who has legal status in the U.S., be returned here. And so there's a lot of serious questions as to the extent that in the scenario that the Trump administration were to try to deport citizens to El Salvador, would they then, like they're doing with Abrego Garcia, throw their hands up in the air? And as the deputy chief of staff said yesterday, suggested it would be arrogant to think that they have any control over what happens in a sovereign territory, a sovereign country like El Salvador. Effectively, once somebody is sent outside of the U.S. borders, the administration is no longer responsible.
And Vaughn, it was fascinating to watch that meeting unfold in the Oval Office yesterday. Bukele has called himself the world's coolest dictator. What has the reaction been like from Washington about this visit?
Right. I actually wanted to let you listen to Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat out of Maryland, who made the case that if he didn't get the chance to meet with Bukele himself yesterday, that he would go to El Salvador and go and seek to have access to the prison. I want to let you listen to a little bit of Senator Van Hollen.
This is unsustainable. I mean, the Trump administration's position, in my view, is absolutely unsustainable, as is the position of the president of El Salvador. They are clearly just snubbing their nose at the courts, including the Supreme Court.
And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in a statement wrote, quote, President Bukele's comment today is pure nonsense. The law is clear. Due process was grossly violated. A threat to one is a threat to all. Clearly, the president of the United States sees a close partner in Bukele, who, as you noted, has called himself the coolest dictator in the world. Guys?
All right, Vaughn Hilliard, thanks so much.
Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, good morning. So as we've established, last week the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return. The Trump administration appears to be saying, well, it doesn't need to initiate the return, it would just need to help. Pam Bondi said this recently. Let's listen.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
All right, what does the law say here? Are we in sort of untested territory?
Joe, as you know, I hate to say I told you so, but play my I told you so music, because I said this 2 or 3 days ago when the order came out. The order from the Supreme Court is a kind of Rorschach test. You know those things where you might see a butterfly, I see something else. And I knew when it came out that the Trump administration would read that exact same Supreme Court order as favorable to them. And here's why. I think a lot of confusion results from the fact that one attorney in the DOJ did argue, or at least admit, that Garcia was deported as a result of an administrative error. And that's true. But that same attorney's been put on administrative leave. Clearly, the Trump administration doesn't even back that position. And I knew from the language of the order, which essentially said it sent the case back down to the district court to issue an order consistent with the Supreme Court's directive to not exceed its power, and within the scope of its power to not exceed, whether or not it can force the executive branch to do things that a court can't force it to do. Once I read that, I knew the Trump administration is going to declare victory and say, the Supreme Court has essentially said to the district court, it cannot order us to bring Garcia back. You can read the order yourself, and you can see the wiggle room on both sides.
Yeah, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, actually had something to say about this yesterday. We can listen to that.
The foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
So we've been hearing about this potential showdown between the executive and the courts for quite some time now. Is the Trump administration just defying this order? Can you look at it that way at all?
You can, but you can also say that the Trump administration does not believe they're defying the order. They read the Supreme Court's order as telling the district court to only order the Trump administration to do what the district court can order it to do. And you heard Marco Rubio toe the party line, which is that telling the administration, the executive branch, how to conduct foreign relations is outside the Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 powers and the interplay of those powers. That is something reserved to the executive branch and the executive branch alone. So they will continue to defy it, but folks on the left will call it defiance. I promise you, the Trump administration does not believe they are defying any court orders at this point, other than ones they deem unlawful.
So El Salvador won't send him back. The Trump administration clearly not trying to get him back. What are the next legal steps here?
Probably we're going to see contempt. And what I suspect is every federal judge involved, they'll probably never admit it, really doesn't want to hold anyone in contempt, because then you get into the incredibly thorny issue of whose fault is this, right? Everybody has a defense that I was just following orders except one person, the person at the top, Donald Trump. So all of these judges are probably hopping mad, whether it's the Supreme Court on down to the district court. There are judges who think this is wrong. The Trump administration is defying an order. But what do you do about it? Who do you hold in contempt? That is probably the next step. But you can see in the administration's filings just in the last day or so, they continue to interpret the Supreme Court's order as allowing them to do exactly what they're doing now, which folks are calling defiance, but they call acting consistently with the Constitution.
All right. Danny Cevallos, thank you so much.
Well, some Americans are feeling tariff whiplash this morning after President Trump signaled that he's planning for new tariffs, this time on pharmaceutical drugs and chips for electronics. It comes less than a week after he paused the tariffs that would have affected some of those same electronics. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell has the details.
As markets and manufacturers brace for more turbulence, what looked like a reprieve from some tariffs is now being cast by the White House as a reclassification.
I don't want to hurt anybody, but the end result is we're going to get to the position of greatness for our country.
The White House had announced this weekend that consumer electronics, from smartphones to flat screens, as well as semiconductor components, would be exempt from reciprocal tariffs. But then officials said those goods would face a different category of tariffs under an authority linked to national security. Pressed about exemptions for cell phones, the president kept his options open.
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible.
The White House says despite the appearance of whiplash, there is no mixed message.
I think that it all has been very carefully designed and makes a good deal of sense.
Shoppers, wary that tariffs could drive up prices, are weighing when to buy.
I would definitely do everything now. Anything that I would purchase right now would be a new phone, new television, mainly electronics.
I didn't really think I needed to upgrade. Again, with the uncertainty of these tariffs and the way the economy is moving, I'd rather just keep the $2,800 that I spent on the laptop.
With most toys produced in China facing the steepest of tariffs, some small business owners say swings in tariff policy are not child's play for their bottom line.
Uncertainty is not a way to run a business, and uncertainty certainly is not a way to run a government.
Our thanks to Kelly O'Donnell for that report. The White House has said that one of the reasons for the tariffs is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Now, tech company NVIDIA announced plans to start making AI supercomputer chips here for the very first time.
The suspect accused in Sunday's arson attack on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence has been denied bail. 38-year-old Cody Balmer was arraigned last night on charges including terrorism and attempted homicide. Balmer is accused of climbing a fence, breaking windows, and throwing Molotov cocktails into the house as Shapiro and his family slept inside. Court documents say Balmer harbored a hatred toward Shapiro. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster has the latest.
Good morning. And that suspect, Cody Balmer, 38-year-old mechanic, he was in front of a judge yesterday for his arraignment, and the judge denied his bail. So he'll be behind bars for this foreseeable future. But yesterday, we really got a clear picture of the early phases of this investigation and what police have been able to learn from these early phases. We know that they say that Bomber confessed to them. He turned himself in on Sunday. He told them that, according to court documents, that he harbored hatred for Governor Shapiro, and he walked about an hour from his home to the governor's residence that you see behind me. It was here. He was wearing a black jacket, wearing black boots, and carrying a small bag when he hopped over the fence for the governor's mansion that surrounds the entire perimeter of the building, and that's when he used the hammer to break windows and deployed at least 2 Molotov cocktails inside, causing that massive fire. Now, I spoke to the fire chief yesterday, and he is calling this man a domestic terrorist. He said to reporters that this blaze came dangerously close to becoming a much more serious tragedy, essentially because of a set of doors blocking off and separating the main ballroom from the grand staircase that leads up to the governor's residence where he was with his family and his guests. Because those main doors were closed, that prevented this from becoming a much more serious tragedy. That, of course, will become evidence in the case against Bomber, who we know will appear before a judge on April 23rd. Again, this is something that people are watching very closely. We heard from Governor Shapiro. He condemned any acts of political violence. Yesterday, we heard from President Trump calling this guy essentially a psycho. From both sides of the aisle, you're hearing condemnation for what took place here. The governor and his family are safe, but of course, clearly shaken up as we've been watching those dump trucks and movement inside the residence of the Pennsylvania governor early this morning. Back to you.
All right, Shaq, thank you. Well, an earthquake in Southern California left some people rattled on Monday. It was a 5.2 magnitude quake, which struck outside of San Diego. A series of aftershocks then shook the region for several more hours, with some stronger than a magnitude 3.0. But they didn't appear to cause any major damage. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has more.
A powerful 5.2 magnitude earthquake rocking Southern California.
San Diego must have been like a 5 something. Whoa, my God, that was huge.
Shaking buildings and sending residents scrambling. This mother grabbing her baby from a playpen, rushing outdoors to safety. A baby monitor capturing this 11-month-old child rattled in her crib. In a classroom, students sheltering under their desks with their teacher.
Thank you. We need to be safe with our head.
The earthquake hitting just after 10 a.m. local time. The epicenter near Julian, California, roughly 40 miles northeast of San Diego. Officials say no immediate reports of injuries, but the incident still jarring.
Oh my God. That was so scary.
This woman who took cover in her office in downtown San Diego telling us the quake triggered her memories of similar tremors back home in Mexico City. As the shuddering stopped in Southern California, residents taking stock of the aftermath. Cracks in a patio in Chula Vista widening. A highway left littered with rocks in Santa Isabel.
Is everywhere.
This liquor store manager in Julian documenting the damage after the quake shook bottles off his shelves.
Glass falling, whiskey, scotch, an assortment of different bottles. First time in 15 years I felt this kind of earthquake here. So it was definitely one for the books.
Governor Gavin Newsom posting on X saying he's been briefed on the quake. His team's now assessing if emergency response is needed. Dana Griffin, NBC News.
And spring decidedly not in the air for parts of the country this morning.
NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now, talking about some winter weather in the Great Lakes. Angie?
Yes, indeed, guys. The calendar says April, but the weather forecast says, I don't know, February, with some of these snow showers lasting for our friends across the Great Lakes, and some rain, too. You can see some of that spread across parts of the Northeast throughout the morning hours. Washington, D.C. has been dealing with some of the shower activity, and that's kind of the setup here as we get through the rest of our day. We'll still see some of these snow showers swirling along the Great Lakes. The system that's bringing this to us is going to continue to kick to the east, but we'll still still have some of the snow shower activity across the interior areas of the Northeast and some showers and thunderstorms across parts of the Northeast by this afternoon. Temperature-wise, we are also dealing with delayed spring-like temperatures across the East. We've still got the 50s in Indianapolis. We've got the 40s for Green Bay, upper 60s for Memphis. But across this region, anywhere from 5 to 15 degrees below normal. A very different story if you look west of the Rockies, specifically places like Phoenix, ending up into the mid-90s again today. It was a warm weekend for them. We're taking that right into the next couple of days, too. Temperatures into parts of the northern plains into the 70s this afternoon. So feeling much like spring and even late spring across that region, but it's going to take us a little longer to get parts of the east feeling like that. We've still got the 50s tomorrow in Pittsburgh and New York City. Richmond ending up into the mid-60s, along with Knoxville topping out at 66 degrees tomorrow. And then that's when the good news starts to come if you're looking for some of these warmer temperatures. We go from the 50s on Thursday in Detroit to the low 70s rather on Friday. We've got the upper 70s on Friday in Cincinnati. And heading into the weekend, Baltimore, you get the 70s on Friday, but then the 80s on Saturday. We've got a similar story across parts of the Northeast, places like Boston ending up into those low 70s by the time the weekend rolls around. And we've still got the 80s on tap into the weekend for places like Charlotte. Meanwhile, your Thursday and Friday could see some of those stronger storms developing. Here's one spot that we're expecting on Thursday. Some strong wind gusts, some hail right in the center of the country, specifically Des Moines, going to be in the bullseye of that risk area for Thursday. And then looking ahead to Friday, we've got more of that stretched from Michigan to Texas with 38 million people under that severe threat. So this is giving spring a little bit, but temperatures not so much.
Not the part of spring we like.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, dreams delayed. New numbers show the age of first-time homebuyers is at a record high. The eye-opening new survey signaling a growing problem.
Up first, progress toward a ceasefire in the Middle East. The new proposal made by Israel to Hamas as the fighting continues in Gaza. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In the Middle East, fragile negotiations are underway to reach another ceasefire in Gaza and release the remaining Israeli hostages. Media outlets there are reporting that mediators in Egypt and Qatar presented Hamas with a new Israeli proposal on Monday. It comes as the families of Israeli hostages celebrate their second Passover without their loved ones.
Meanwhile, the United Nations is warning about the rising humanitarian crisis due to an Israeli blockade, saying that has cut off the flow of food, medicine, and supplies into Gaza for the last month and a half. And an Israeli missile strike destroyed parts of the last functioning hospital in Gaza City on Sunday, which the IDF said was a Hamas command center.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley now joins us with the latest from Tel Aviv. So, Matt, what are Israel and Hamas bringing to the table at these negotiations? Is there any reason to be optimistic they might finally reach a deal?
Yeah, Joe, I mean, we're talking about much more frenetic negotiations, much more forceful negotiations as pressure mounts on both sides. However, you're asking what both sides are bringing to the table. My answer is totally different versions of events, actually, a different understanding of what a deal would look like and how the day after, as it's been called, in the Gaza Strip would appear to both sides. Now, we have seen a proposal, as you mentioned, by the Israelis. It would involve the release of about 9 prisoners over the course of a couple days and a 45-day temporary ceasefire that would involve, crucially, the allowing in of more humanitarian aid that had been suspended into the Gaza Strip for at least the past several months and has caused what, as we mentioned, a brewing humanitarian crisis there. Now, there isn't much optimism from either side that this could get to a deal. The ball is now in Hamas's court. They have said that they received Israel's proposal, that they are now mulling it over and deciding how to respond. But we've already heard from Hamas saying that one of the main issues here is the same issue we saw last time, the time before, and the time before that, ever since this all started a year and a half ago. A fundamental disagreement between Hamas and Israel on whether or not the fighting will finally stop and the Israelis will withdraw from the Gaza Strip. The Israelis want to see all or most of their hostages released, the Hamas hostages released, in exchange for some sort of temporary ceasefire, whereas Hamas have said that they are holding on to their hostages until they can get guarantees from the Israelis that the war will be finished and that they won't be made to disarm and that the Israelis will withdraw from the Gaza Strip. These are fundamentally different views of how this whole thing ends, and it has been dogging these negotiations from the get-go. Guys?
Well, Matt, as these negotiations continue to drag on, Gaza is under the longest blockade since the war started. What's the humanitarian situation like there?
Yeah, we've been hearing from the United Nations, from the Red Cross, from advocacy groups saying that the humanitarian situation is dire and getting worse. We saw just a couple of weeks ago that bakeries that were backed by the United Nations shut down and were no longer able to distribute much needed bread to residents. It's been months since they cut off electricity to a vital desalination plant that had been providing fresh water to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And of course, medicine and food from the outside has long been shut down since before Israel resumed its attacks in the Gaza Strip on March 18th. So we're talking about a situation that is getting much, much, much worse. As you mentioned, the Al Ahli hospital was just bombed. That was the last fully functioning hospital in the Gaza Strip. It had already been taking patients from other destroyed hospitals. So now functioning medical care has also become impossibly more scarce.
Matt, before we let you go, I want to ask about what's happening in Yemen. It's been a month since the U.S. began that intense airstrike campaign against Houthi rebels in Yemen's capital. This started after the rebels threatened to target Israeli ships and waterways around Yemen. Real quick, what are we learning about this campaign?
Yeah, well, we're seeing more attacks, more strikes, presumably by the U.S., so it sounds as though they haven't been taking responsibility. Once again, in places like Al-Hodeida, other locations near and inside the capital. Now, the change in strategy that we're hearing from the Trump administration, and this has been very public, Marco Rubio has said this himself, is that unlike from the Biden administration's attacks against the Houthis, this will not be reactive. This will be a proactive set of strikes that are ongoing, that will be unrelenting, and that won't just target missile silos and other military installations, but top Houthi commanders. So far, though, guys, the results have been modest.
All right, Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you.
Well, tragedy in Nigeria, where the president says at least 40 people are dead after a gunman attacked a Christian farming community.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga has that and some other international headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Stephen, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. The president of Nigeria said that he has ordered an investigation into that killing of at least 40 people in a Christian farming community in Nigeria on Sunday. Now, this is the latest in a series of attacks in the north-central part of the country, blamed on the Fulani, a Muslim tribe accused of targeting Christian farmers. Amnesty International said the victims, who included children and the elderly, were taken by surprise and could not flee the gunmen. Let's go to Hungary now, where on Monday the parliament voted in favor of allowing the government to ban public LGBTQ+ events. The ban, proposed by the ruling coalition led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, is part of a so-called child protection legislation that prohibits the depiction or promotion of homosexuality to minors. Ahead of the vote, opposition politicians and other protesters attempted to blockade the entrance to the parliament and were physically removed by the police. And let's end this tour of the world in Sweden, where for the next 20 days, millions of people will be glued in front of TV and computer screen 24/7, watching moose slowly migrate. The show is called, of course, The Great Moose Migration, and is simply the live feed of the migration of dozens of moose towards summer grazing pastures. Not much is happening for hours at a time, as you can see, but still the Swedes love to wait for one of those 26 remote cameras to catch the glimpse of a moose. In 2024, 9 million viewers watched the moose slowly walk or swim across rivers. Well, clearly the Swedes find it amusing.
Ah, there we go.
We're waiting for it.
I wonder if they name the moose. They're like, oh, look, there's Jim, the moose. Yeah. All right. Claudio, thank you. Appreciate it. Coming up, movie mogul Harvey Weinstein back in court, facing the same charges that put him behind bars 5 years ago. More on the high-profile retrial that is set to start today.
Plus, are you stressed about money? You are far from alone. Financial anxiety is on the rise. We'll share some ways to cope with the stress. Your weekly check-in is next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Jury selection is set to begin today in New York in the retrial of Harvey Weinstein, nearly a year after a state appeals court overturned his 2020 rape conviction. The disgraced movie mogul is facing the same allegations that sent him to prison 5 years ago. The retrial comes after the appeals court ruled the jury's decision was tainted by prejudicial testimony and improper rulings. NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas spoke exclusively with Weinstein's attorney about what to expect this time around.
There are definitely times where it's like deja vu, like I can't believe I'm making this argument again to the judge. It's a different judge. That's the biggest game changer here.
That's Harvey Weinstein's attorney, Arthur Adala, who's representing him in his New York criminal trial. Weinstein is expected to be retried on nearly the same charges that sentenced him to 23 years in prison in 2020.
He's excited for a fair trial. He's not going to have 12 jurors who are listening to chants outside the courthouse about Fry, Harvey's a guilty, Harvey's a rapist, all kinds of horrible things while the trial was going on. That's not going to happen.
The trial captivated the nation when the Oscar-winning producer was found guilty of third-degree rape and one count of criminal sexual act in the first degree. He was acquitted on 3 other counts.
It is a good example, and we need a good example for all the victims out there.
Now his retrial is coming nearly 8 years after over 80 women, including some celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow and Ashley Judd, accused him of a range of allegations in 2017, ultimately fueling the Me Too movement.
I came here today to see this through.
Although Adala has already defended Weinstein, he says there will be challenges, the main one finding an impartial jury.
Jury selection is the key. If you don't get jurors who are willing to base their evidence on what they see on the witness stand, what they hear on the witness stand, but they're going to let all the other bad stuff they've heard about Harvey for the last 6 years it's been flood into their brain, then, it's like climbing Everest.
But how is a retrial even possible? That's because the New York Court of Appeals overturned Weinstein's conviction last year after they found in a 4-3 decision that Weinstein didn't get a fair trial. The court announcing in a statement that a decision to let women testify about allegations that were not part of the actual case, quote, portrayed the defendant in a highly prejudicial light. One thing that could be different this time around, hearing from Weinstein in his own words.
Will Harvey Weinstein take the stand?
He has always wanted to take the stand. And it's kind of defense attorney 101 that you try to do everything you can not to make that happen. Usually you try not to put your client on the stand, but Harvey definitely wants to testify, and it'll be a game time decision.
Which at a pretrial hearing in January didn't seem likely because Weinstein told the judge that he didn't think he'd live to see his retrial because of a series of health issues and what he's called improper care at Rikers, where he's been held since his conviction was overturned. NBC News previously reported that he was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, an uncommon form of cancer of the bone marrow.
He himself said he was dying. I mean,
well, initially,
does he have months left to live?
So where we helped him was he wasn't getting the proper treatment, he wasn't getting the proper medicine, and by the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so we became very, very squeaky. And so he has been getting his medicine, he has been getting some of the treatment that he needs.
One thing is likely, juries might be hearing from the women whose accusations put Weinstein in prison.
Some might say that this would be re-traumatizing to have to get up there, retell your story.
Well, that was not my decision to have them come back. That's the prosecutor's decision. The prosecutor could very easily say, one of the people who you mentioned, Harvey's done all the jail time. If he gets found not guilty of the other 2 people and only guilty of that one person, he's done. Time served. It's over. So the prosecutor's the one who's re-traumatizing her.
And our thanks to Chloe Malas for that report. NBC News reached out to the Manhattan District Attorney's office, but a spokesman declined to comment ahead of jury selection. We should also note Weinstein was convicted of rape in a separate 2022 Los Angeles case and sentenced to 16 years in prison. He's currently appealing that conviction.
Time now for our weekly mental health check-in. First up, it's tax day, and if the constant buzz from Wall Street and Washington has your stress levels rising, you are certainly not alone. We're breaking down practical ways to manage financial anxiety in these uncertain times.
Plus, with ADHD diagnoses at an all-time high, new research shows scientists are rethinking what the condition really is and how to best treat it.
Joining us now to discuss these latest health headlines is psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Dr. Robbie, always good to have you with us. So let's start with those financial worries. A lot of people are feeling overwhelmed by this.
Yeah.
So how can you start to regain a sense of control when so much like market swings and global events just feels like it's out of our hands?
Well, it's really important to know what we can control and what we can't control. We can't control the markets, but we can control what we do to make our own interventions. For example, like Deep breathing can be tremendously helpful in terms of reducing anxiety. Exercising and stretching has also been known to be very helpful. If we get and take action, sorry for the loud noise in the back, I live in New York. If we talk to somebody that helps us to feel better, that's also really helpful in terms of connecting with supportive people. Spending time outdoors and also focusing on what you're doing to not multitask can also be very helpful in terms of focusing on what we can do for ourselves.
Good advice. Those sirens, all part of city life, Dr. Robbie. Well, let's talk about this new research on ADHD. It is fascinating stuff, challenging what we thought we understood for so long, suggesting ADHD might not be biologically fixed, but could shift depending on the environment people are in. How could this change the way parents, teachers, and maybe even doctors think about treating kids with ADHD symptoms?
Well, it's always important to know that our environment plays a role in the expression of various diagnoses and mental health challenges. ADHD, they found new studies that suggest that behavioral training for parents is very helpful for the child that has ADHD. The most well-known and scientifically based treatment is still stimulant medication and behavioral intervention. And now they're really expanding and looking at other ideas of what can be helpful, including non-stimulant interventions for those who can't tolerate stimulants, and teaching parents how to provide structured environment and how to identify these issues sooner rather than later, which is also tremendously helpful in terms of treating ADHD.
Dr. Robbie, so often we like to talk about positive steps people can take for their mental health. So here's one for you. We've got new research suggesting that looking up at the stars can actually ease your anxiety. We've talked a lot about how nature can be helpful, but what is it about stargazing that is so good for our mental health?
So what this study showed was looking at the stars can induce a sense of awe, which is connected to feeling love and joy. And it reminds us in some way that we're all connected. And what I would say is that it also takes us out of ourselves and shifts our perspective to thinking about what else is out there in the universe and that we're all connected in some really unique way. And there was one researcher that was looking into this and found that it was tremendously helpful in terms of our mental well-being because it did change our perspective. And who doesn't like looking at the beautiful stars? And the best time to do it is during the winter and autumn months because that's when we have more night sky.
All right, some good advice there. I think about how these major eclipses we've had over the years sort of have this bigger sense of bringing us all together, but on a smaller scale, we can do it all the time by just looking up at the stars up there. All right, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, as always, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, coming up, it's tax day, but if you still have not filed, you might have a little extra time. The last-minute extension just granted for several states.
And history in space. Speaking of stars, hear from the all-female crew about their journey to the edge of space. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. For many young adults here in America, the dream of owning a home is drifting further and further out of reach. The average age of first-time home buyers is now at a record high, 38 years old. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans takes a closer look.
Ready to see the house?
Yeah. At the age of 37, Hanmi Lee is in the market now to buy her first home. She's in the suburbs of Philadelphia with her husband David and their 7-year-old daughter Luna. Their homeownership dreams delayed.
Did you ever think you guys would be in your 30s and still renting?
I definitely took my time to think about buying a house, and then now I'm just regretting waiting.
For younger Americans, homeownership is increasingly out of reach. In the 1980s, the median age of first-time homebuyers was 29. By 2023, 35, and last year spiking to 38 years old. The door closed to many by high prices, low inventory, and mortgage rates hovering around 7%.
No one in their young 20s are buying homes.
Real estate agent Ricky Voong says conditions are the toughest he's ever seen. Last month, the median monthly payment for homeowners hit an all-time high of $2,800. Roughly 70% of American households can't afford a $400,000 home. The national median sales price, almost $420,000.
So over here is our dining area, but it's limited. We're limited on space.
Hanmi, who works in insurance, and David, a police officer, have outgrown the two-bedroom townhome they currently rent. They'd also like a backyard for their dog, Tank, and more space for another child.
And what if it's not a girl? With the age gap, too, they would want their own rooms.
They've been searching for 2 years now.
When they said, oh, just give it a couple months, the market's going to change, this and that, but it's just...
It hasn't.
It hasn't changed for the better.
Homes in their daughter Luna's school district are in high demand.
The competition makes it hard, makes it difficult, for sure.
Bidding wars driving prices in their area sky high. That house they were touring previously sold in 2019 for $209,000. The price today?
This is listed at almost a $500,000 house.
Out of the price range for Hanmi and David. Their dream of homeownership delayed but not diminished, and Luna already in architect mode.
I think I want like this bed that has a slide and a ladder and like a fire under.
Get right on that, Dad.
Christine Romans, NBC News, Lansdale, Pennsylvania.
More money news now. It's tax day here in America, so let's dig into some important deadlines you should know about this year.
CNBC's Savannah now has that and some other financial headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Stephen. Good morning. All right, well, it's tax day, as you just mentioned, but if you live in 9 states, you have a few extra days to file. So automatic extensions to May 1st have been applied to areas hit by natural disasters, and that includes Florida and North Carolina, which were hit and affected by hurricanes Helene and Milton last year. Now, taxpayers in LA County will have until October 15th to pay due to the wildfires in January. People in Kentucky and several counties in West Virginia have until November 3rd, and that's due to severe storms in February. Hertz says some user data was stolen in a breach involving one of its vendors. Hertz says the vendor was targeted by hackers in October and December last year. Now, the data could include customers' contact, credit card, and driver's license information, and a smaller number of people may have had their Social Security or passport information stolen. Hertz says it's not aware of any incidents where the information was used for fraudulent purposes. And travelers are seeking cooler locales for their summer vacation, shunning traditional hotspots. Baby boomers and first-time travelers may be driving a so-called coolcations trend in Europe. Travel agents telling CNBC the appeal of booking a trip to Mediterranean destinations in Italy, Greece, and Spain in July and August has lost its shine. Instead, people are going to Northern Europe, the Nordic and Baltic countries, to escape the heat. Bookings from the UK to Iceland and Scandinavia jumping 50% over the last year, guys.
You know, we established earlier this hour you can watch moose migrating very slowly.
Slowly, I mean.
In that part of the world. So maybe that's part of it, too.
That's got to be the big draw.
See the moose. Thanks, Savannah. For the first time in more than 6 decades, an all-female crew made history in space. The star-studded group of astronauts launched on a Blue Origin commercial flight yesterday, landing safely in Texas. NBC's Priscilla Thompson takes a closer look at the short but life-changing voyage.
2, 1. Blasting off for 11 unforgettable minutes. The first all-female space crew in more than 60 years.
1, 2, 3, take us space!
Including pop star Katy Perry and journalist Gayle King, along with Lauren Sanchez, the fiance of Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos.
Look at the moon. Look.
The historic 6 marveling at the moon and the Earth.
And you look at it and you're like, we're all in this together.
While floating for 4 minutes, Katy Perry weightless with a daisy in hand, her daughter's namesake. New Shepard's booster rocket landing first.
Picture perfect landing, right?
This reusable booster that took them up now safely back on the ground, the massive rocket ready for its next mission amid the space tourism boom. Then, in front of a star-studded crowd, the astronauts all smiles back on Earth.
It's about making space for future women and taking up space and belonging.
Amanda Nguyen, emotional after becoming the first Vietnamese woman in space. She's a survivor of sexual assault, carrying aboard a painful reminder.
And it's the hospital van from the day.
For anyone who's ever had to struggle through life circumstances that weren't their choice, I want you to know that you will make it through.
And those magical moments on board, the start of a shared space sisterhood, celebrated amongst the stars. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Van Horn, Texas.
That's amazing. More stargazing, love that. Well, coming up, gotta cash them all. A decades-old trading card trend now getting some new life.
We're going to show you what's behind the renewed popularity of Pokemon cards through the eyes of our friend and collector, Brian Chung. Morning News Now. We'll be right back.
Finally this hour, an iconic game from the 90s fetching a small fortune. We're talking about, of course, Pokemon cards. The nearly 30-year-old Japanese franchise is seeing a resurgence after releasing a new trading card game just last month. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung even dug up his old collection from 26 years ago to see just how much it's worth.
Baseball cards, Beanie Babies, and comics, things you may find during your spring cleaning. Collectibles related to childhood memorabilia could be worth a lot more than you'd imagine. Keep an eye out for one category now worth a lot of cash: Pokemon. The cute pocket monsters with the catchy theme song.
Gotta catch 'em all, Pokemon.
The franchise that started off in 1996 as a video game is now an icon of millennial culture.
One of the most powerful Pokemon of all.
The 2016 mobile game Pokemon Go had millions of people in the street catching creatures.
I got that guy.
And Pokemon's latest trading card releases stirring up an absolute frenzy at retailers.
Hey, don't do that, bro.
Oh, sorry, go. Fast forward to a resurgence in Pokemon popularity, making some OG merchandise worth a pretty penny. This 1999 first edition Charizard at Sotheby's sold for almost $200,000.
We got like a booster box, a bunch of stuff, a lot of things.
At a trading card show in Suffern, New York, savvy traders scoring big bucks, including 13-year-olds.
It's Charizard base set Shadowless, $650, yeah. I bought it for $25. I'm probably gonna save up and buy a car, maybe 2 years, 3 years, yeah.
Call that young money. The average card from the original set released in 1999 has more than tripled in value over just the last 2 years. Celebrities have jumped on the Pokemon bandwagon too. Post Malone and Katy Perry lending their voices to a recent anniversary album, and Ryan Reynolds playing the main role in the 2019 movie Detective Pikachu.
Listen up. We got ways to make you talk.
Another iconic collector, this guy, who dusted off his own collection from 26 years ago.
I feel like a 10-year-old again being here.
And apparently, I might be sitting on some gold.
Oh, so right off the bat, you have some of the best cards possible. You're looking at easy $2,800.
$2,800 for this card?
Yeah.
That I found in my closet.
But the experts warned me that the value of my cards depend heavily on the shape they're in. So we headed to PSA, a company that verifies and grades all kinds of collectibles, scoring them from 1 to 10, 10 being the gold standard. General Manager Elizabeth Gruna says these days they see more than 500,000 Pokemon cards every month.
A lot of times with Pokemon cards, especially older ones, we see that the corners have some damage on them.
That's going to be a few $1,000s.
Yeah, probably.
Brutal.
Should have been more careful when you were a kid.
Well, I was actually playing with them. So how did mine fare? Time to scan and submit my cards.
We'll take a picture.
Which then head to graders like Louis Salas. He's laser focused on the smallest details.
I'm looking at corners. For this particular card, I'm looking at this edges to make sure there's no silvering.
Once graded, my cards are encased in plastic and labeled with their score.
I gotta tell you, I'm super nervous about this.
I'm excited to see what you get.
And this is an 8 out of 10.
Yeah,
which
that's
is like,
amazing. For that
like
card,
mint.
it's mint. Yeah, like that's really, really good for this card. So recent card in this same grade, the same one, sold for over $2,000.
$2,000?
So this is a great investment piece that you've got here.
I'm not the only millennial who rummaged through their childhood bedrooms.
Since Pokemon Pocket came out in October, we've seen about a 40% increase in the Pokemon submission volume.
And yes, while each collectible has its value, you can't put a price on the fun.
Can we trade?
Sure.
Shake hands?
Sure.
Okay, let's show them to the camera. We just made a trade. Thanks, Layla. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Brian Chung, NBC News.
The Pokemon cards I definitely remember, but I had blocked out Pokemon Go altogether. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but your news continues right now. Good morning. I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah today. Joe will be back in just a moment. Right now on Morning News Now, the exploding federal feud over a Maryland man mistakenly deported to an El Salvador prison. Now, in a White House meeting with President Trump, El Salvador's leader digging in, refusing to grant him a ticket home.
How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
The legal battle taking shape over what's already become a major flashpoint of the second Trump presidency. We'll be speaking to one of the man's attorneys in just a few minutes. Also this morning, a shaky start to the work week for millions in Southern California after a 5.2 magnitude earthquake jolted San Diego County yesterday. The shock felt from Mexico all the way to LA. We'll bring you scenes from the devastating aftermath in just a moment. Plus, fighting the fakes. A new health warning today coming straight from the FDA on those popular weight loss drugs like Ozempic. Why officials are now urging patients to double check their prescriptions to make sure they're actually getting the real thing. And it's tax day in America, but if you haven't filed, there's still some time for some of you. Why the IRS is doling out automatic extensions for folks in some states so they can breathe a little easier on this Tuesday. And we begin this hour with details from the President of El Salvador's visit to the White House yesterday. President Nayib Bukele has played a key role in Trump's deportation efforts, taking in hundreds of migrants deported by the U.S. under claims that they're gang members. Among those deported is Kilmar Obrego Garcia, a man that the Justice Department admits was sent to a prison in El Salvador because of a, quote, administrative error. Bukele told reporters in the Oval Office yesterday that he would not send Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. He has not been charged criminally in the U.S. or El Salvador. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake joins us from outside the White House with more on this. Garrett, good morning.
Some of the facts here are not in dispute, including that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was in the U.S. illegally and that the Supreme Court has now ordered the administration to, quote, facilitate his return to the U.S. But the precise meaning of that order now has the White House in battle mode, as they insist, without providing evidence, that Garcia is a violent gang member. The White House is now looking to push the president's immigration authorities as far as they can go in this case, and suggesting that those authorities could even allow the president to ship American or homegrown criminals overseas, too. This morning, amid multiple court standoffs, the White House digging in on immigration.
We're getting him out.
The Justice Department acknowledges Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a father of three with a work permit in Maryland, was deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador as the result of an administrative error. Last week, the Supreme Court ordered the administration to facilitate his return, an order the Trump administration has so far not acted on.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us.
Meeting with President Trump on Monday, El Salvador's president, who refused to send Abrego Garcia back.
How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it.
The White House now arguing Abrego Garcia was not mistakenly deported, instead claiming he's a member of the violent gang MS-13. His family denies it, and he's never been charged criminally in either country. In the same meeting, President Trump also floated deporting U.S. citizens.
We also have homegrown criminals. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that.
Before the meeting, Trump can be heard on a live stream shared by the Salvadoran president's team. Trump telling Bukele he may need more prisons.
Homegrowns are next. The homegrowns. You got to build about 5 more places.
Democrats responding to Trump's suggestion.
It would be unlawful and unconstitutional.
Meanwhile, a Tufts University student who was arrested by plainclothes ICE officers in Massachusetts submitting a court filing obtained by NBC News, which details the conditions of her holding facility in Louisiana as, quote, unsanitary, unsafe, and inhumane. In a hearing about the matter, the government arguing Rumeysa Ozturk should not be moved from the Louisiana detention center she has been in for nearly 3 weeks and sent back to Vermont. As the Vermont judge hearing that case ponders his next move, he raised a question in a filing that could be central to both cases. He asked what happens if he orders Ozturk released and the government simply refuses to act, as they appear to be doing in the Garcia case, suggesting that could trigger a, quote, constitutional crisis. There's no specific timeline for when that decision will come, but immigration advocates and the White House are both watching closely.
All right, Garrett Hake, thank you. Joining us now is Rina Gandhi, a partner at Murray Osorio Immigration Law Firm and one of the attorneys representing Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Rina, good morning. Thanks for joining us. And let's start with that central accusation in this case. The Trump administration says Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13. Can you tell us, has he ever been a member of that violent gang? And if not, where do you think these accusations come from?
First, good morning. Thank you for having me. These accusations come from an old filing, singular filing in 2019, and they're a red herring. This case is not about what happened in 2019. This case is about the unlawful removal of Mr. Abrego Garcia. I would agree with the district court judge's decision last week. Her order finds the accusations to be, she didn't say it this way, but I would say it laughable.
And the question, the central question there of him potentially being a member of Abrego Garcia, it came from 2019, but can you tell us where it comes from?
It comes from a DHS filing from 2019. It's a singular unnamed informant.
Unnamed informant. Well, let's listen to what some of the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi had to say in the Oval Office meeting yesterday about this.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
And last week, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration has to facilitate it, as we heard Bondi say there. And as we just heard her say, they're interpreting that as not needing to initiate his return. What is your reaction to that reasoning?
My reaction is this is not a new situation where the United States is having to help someone come back into the United States, whether they're a U.S. citizen, a legal permanent resident, or someone without any status. This is not new. ICE knows how to do this. It's in their policy manual. No one is asking Bukele to smuggle Mr. Abrego Garcia into the United States. We're asking the U.S. government to ask for their partner in El Salvador to release him.
Do you think if President Trump asked President Bukele to return Abrego Garcia, that he would do it?
I think given our strong relationship with El Salvador, certainly now, yes.
And what comes next in this case? Are you able to speak to Abrego Garcia? Are your law team able to talk to him while he's being held there?
Not one time. Until the filing just this past weekend, we didn't even have confirmation of life. No, we have not been able to speak with him. The family has not been able to speak with him. We're happy to hear from the filing that he is alive and still in CCOT, not the worst. But no, we've not been able to speak with him. We do have a hearing this afternoon to further this case and hold the government to their requirements according to the according to the Supreme Court and according to the district court judge.
And what do you think will come out of that hearing, and what steps can you take beyond this?
So at this time, it's honestly unclear what will happen at this hearing. The government has made it clear that they're not afraid of saying things that are not true, and they're not afraid of taking no action. I hope that they will be held accountable. Maybe that is depositions. Maybe that is being held in contempt. That's up for the judge to decide.
And Rina, of course, we can't forget Abrego Garcia's family here in the United States and the difficult situation they must be in, particularly his children. Can you tell us at all, how are they handling this?
Well, I think it's been an extremely difficult time. If you can imagine your father, who you thought was safe, who had been granted relief by a court, all of a sudden, within a matter of just a few days, is taken and you haven't heard from him since then. I mean, the pain is unmanageable.
It is. It's hard to imagine. It's heartbreaking to think about, particularly what those kids are going through right now. Rena, thank you so much for your time and helping us understand this today.
Thank you.
Well, turning now to Harvard University, which was hit with a $2 billion funding freeze. It comes after the school rejected demands from the Trump administration that it make some sweeping changes. The school got a letter sent from multiple federal agencies late Friday calling on Harvard to change everything from admissions to hiring practice for its academic programs. The administration also demanded auditing viewpoints of the student body. NBC News senior White House correspondent Hallie Jackson has more.
Hey there, good morning to you. We are talking about a major showdown this morning between the country's oldest and richest school and the Trump administration. Overnight, you had the administration moving to basically punish Harvard for not complying with a list of demands from the government by freezing more than $2 billion in grants. Now, that's because Harvard earlier in the day had told the administration they are not interested in what amounts to a federal takeover, or in their words, government control of the university, which makes Harvard now the highest profile school to go toe-to-toe with the White House here. You may ask, okay, so what are the demands, right? There's a list of them. The administration wanted an immediate shutdown of DEI programs, mandatory sharing of hiring and admissions data, and an audit on what they called viewpoint diversity. They wanted Harvard to restrict the acceptance of international students who were, quote, hostile to American values and institutions, and an overhaul of departments and programs with anti-Semitic records. Now, the White House frames this all as part of its fight against anti-Semitism on college campuses, but Harvard says, well, wait a second, that's actually not the intention of what the government wants to do here. They say that Harvard wants to regulate us, but they're violating our constitutional rights. In a letter, the president of the school saying that no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. Bigger picture here, when you step back, in the eyes of the administration, this is about the use of taxpayer money. They've launched a joint task force looking at anti-Semitism on college campuses, in a move sparked partly by those huge protests we saw last spring. We've already seen Columbia get a list of demands, except in that instance, Columbia University largely acquiesced. That's why what Harvard is doing is so notable here in pushing back on the Trump administration. It's because this new editorial in the Harvard Crimson frames it this way here. Harvard has decided to lead the charge. It can't do it alone, right? That's the framing of how Harvard and some in higher education see it, and what is really a call to action to other schools to follow Harvard's lead, even with billions of dollars on the line. Back to you.
More to come there. All right, Hallie, thank you. Well, new details emerging about the arson attack at the Pennsylvania governor's residence over the weekend. 38-year-old Cody Balmer was arraigned last night on charges including terrorism and attempted homicide. Court documents say Balmer admitted to harboring hatred toward Governor Shapiro. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with the latest on this one. Shaq.
Hi there and good morning. And that suspect, 38-year-old Cody Balmer, he was denied bail after that arraignment when he was sitting before a judge. The fire chief here is calling him a domestic terrorist and says that the fire that he's accused of setting came dangerously close to causing a much more serious situation.
What were you thinking on Sunday?
A rush of questions for arson suspect Cody Balmer, who let his facial expressions do the answering as state troopers escorted him into a courthouse to face a judge. Balmer charged with attempted homicide, arson, terrorism, and other offenses in connection to the Sunday morning fire at the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, where just hours earlier, Governor Josh Shapiro hosted a Passover celebration. Police say Balmer used 2 Molotov cocktails to start the fire after scaling a fence and smashing windows with a hammer. Governor Shapiro, his family, and others were safely evacuated, but Harrisburg's fire chief says a set of closed doors between the ballroom and the hallway leading to the house's main staircase may have made the difference.
It would have been a totally different fire and a totally different outcome.
Court documents also allege Balmer told police he harbored hatred toward the governor, adding if Shapiro found him, quote, he would have beaten him with his hammer. As questions arise about security failures and how Balmer got so close to the governor.
There is already a security review underway to determine how we can ensure that we don't have a repeat of a situation like this.
Officials say Balmer fled the scene but later turned himself in at state police headquarters. According to a police affidavit, troopers searched Balmer's home where they found a jacket, bag, and small sledgehammer, all matching those captured on surveillance video. Public records show Ballmer had an arrest record, including an open assault case. His mother telling the Associated Press her son is bipolar and schizophrenic and had stopped taking his medicine. In court, Ballmer said, quote, "That's a rumor," telling the judge he doesn't suffer from mental illness.
Now, Ballmer did not enter into a plea yesterday during that court hearing. And meanwhile, here at the governor's mansion, you see there in the front lawn, we're looking at those dump trucks. We've been seeing crews come in and out, sometimes carrying bags. The fire chief made an interesting note yesterday when he said that while there was an active fire alarm system at the mansion, there wasn't an active fire suppression system. Think those sprinklers that are in commercial buildings, for example. That likely contributed to the danger that that fire caused. Stephen?
Scary situation. All right, Shaq, thank you. To a major antitrust trial now, and this one is putting social media giant Meta under the microscope. Later today, CEO Mark Zuckerberg is set to take the stand for a second day of testimony after defending his company's business strategy yesterday in a packed D.C. courtroom.
The Federal Trade Commission has accused Meta of stifling competition and creating an illegal social media monopoly when it bought Instagram and WhatsApp. Now, it's possible the trial could force the tech giant to break off those apps. In a statement, Meta said in part, quote, "Regulators should be supporting American innovation rather than seeking to break up a great American company and further advantaging China."
NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us to help break this down. So, Brian, this lawsuit started in 2020 during Trump's first term, and now this is the first big antitrust lawsuit trial happening during his second term. Social media's changed a lot in that time. How does that play into all this?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's actually part of Meta's defense here. So, we are going to have our second day of this court proceeding today. Yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg did take the stand as the government's kind of first witness. They were questioning him about the structure of Meta, trying to advance their case, again, the Federal Trade Commission's case, that they are a monopoly, as they allege. Now, I want to point out that, as you mentioned, Stephen, it's a really good point. The landscape has changed since 2020 when this lawsuit was kind of first, put forth by the Trump administration's FTC at the time. And there was a slide that Meta showed in the courtroom that showed during the 2025 TikTok ban, there was this kind of bifurcation of people going to apps like TikTok, like Xiaohongshu, which is a Chinese website. And that folds into the statement that you just read, which is Meta trying to frame this whole court case as going after an American company, even while you're letting the likes of TikTok and Xiaohongshu, Redbook kind of like proliferate in the social media sphere. So again, things are changing very much, but this is going to take months to work its way through the court system, and we'll have to see where the judge kind of sides on this.
The New York Times is reporting that Zuckerberg recently was trying to lobby President Trump. Has the president said anything publicly about this?
Not since the case began, but there have been conversations between President Trump and Mark Zuckerberg, even within public view. So we don't really have, confirmation on our end that Zuckerberg personally asked the president to drop this case. But who was there on Inauguration Day? Mark Zuckerberg was there. Recently, he was spotted, I believe, at the White House. So presumably, you can imagine that he may have brought this case up. But I want to point out that the president does have an enormous amount of weight in this. If he wanted to, he could order the FTC to drop the case, in which case it's probably highly likely that his own appointee, Andrew Ferguson, who leads the FTC, might follow through on that. But again, it doesn't seem to be the case because the case is working its way through the D.C. circuit right now.
Yeah, it's got to be high on the list of priorities for him to talk to the president about. So this could play out in a few different ways. What's the biggest risk for Meta here?
Well, I think the biggest thing at stake for this company is the breakup. Basically, what could happen here is a judge might say, yeah, we agree with the government's argument that they are a monopoly, that they do have control over a lot of aspects of our social and digital footprints because of the fact that it's not just Facebook and kind of the photos that you might upload on there. It's Instagram, that massive photo sharing site, as well as WhatsApp, which is a really, really big messaging platform overseas, in addition to here in the United States. So they could force a divestiture where maybe those companies spin out. Instagram and WhatsApp would become separate companies that are not linked to Meta. But again, that all depends on how this judge kind of decides, which could take months to figure out.
This could be a landmark case for tech companies just in general. Talk about why that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if you are another tech company like Google or even like Apple, you're watching this case very closely because in some cases you're facing antitrust, allegations of your own, and you want to see how Meta is able to kind of craft their defense, whether or not that's successful, to see whether or not you could see this version of the FTC or maybe even a future iteration of the FTC going after these large corporate, big tech giants that have their arms in many different types of apps, many different aspects of your phone, from social media to emailing to photo sharing. So I think that this is a landmark case. This is certainly the biggest one that Meta has faced, but I think all the big tech community is watching this just as closely. And so are the users of all of those apps. All right, Brian Chung, thanks so much.
On the West Coast, a sizable earthquake rattled Southern California Monday. The magnitude 5.2 quake's epicenter was in San Diego County, but the shocks were felt all across the region. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz is in L.A., joins us with more. Liz, I was actually in L.A. yesterday when those shake alerts went off on everyone's phone. I didn't feel the quake, but a lot of people were certainly talking about it.
Yeah, my alert went off too. Some of the people in our bureau felt it. I didn't this time, but as you know, Joe, Southern California has so many earthquakes, 10,000 earthquakes actually every year, most of them so small they can't be felt. But yesterday, the region did have one of the few quakes a year that could be for even more than 100 miles. And it even prompted an incredible moment. Elephants at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park formed an alert circle to protect their young.
Millions of people across Southern California jolted by a 5.2 magnitude earthquake in San Diego County Monday morning.
It's terrifying because you don't know when it's going to stop.
And we felt the whole house start to shake.
The shaking felt from Mexico all the way to Los Angeles. The vibrating even felt in Palm Springs and among festival goers at Coachella.
I thought my friend was just dancing in the backseat, but we just saw the sign shake.
The epicenter 3 miles south of the small mountain town of Julian.
Just had a fat earthquake.
Where the shaking knocked liquor bottles off shelves.
Glass falling, whiskey, scotch, an assortment of different bottles.
This video shows a woman grabbing her baby and running out of the house. At a local school, students taking cover under their desks along with their teacher.
Be safe with our head.
Even animals reacting. Watch these elephants at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. The herd forming an alert circle, with zoo officials describing it as the animals instinctively circling the younger elephants to protect them from threats.
I was just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Was that an earthquake?
The quake struck just after 10 a.m., prompting a rock slide on this highway.
It seemed like the ground was moaning and like you had thunder underneath your feet.
In this earthquake-prone region, a surprise rattling to kickstart the week.
Compared to ones that I've been in before, I felt like this one was a little bit intense.
Now, thankfully, officials say the quake did not cause any serious damage or injuries. According to experts, it was on the Elsinore Fault, which is part of the San Andreas Fault system, one of the largest in Southern California and historically one of the quietest. The region has felt several small aftershocks, most within the first 90 minutes after that initial shake, Joe.
All right, Liz, thank you so much. Tax day comes with a side of winter weather for some Americans today.
NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us to tell us all about it. Hey, Angie.
I'm sure everybody's thrilled, guys. Tax day and some more snow in April. Yeah, we've got a little bit of that and the potential for some rain in the forecast, but things will get better. There'll be more spring-like here as the week goes on. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, here's the lay of the land when it comes to your satellite and radar. You can see some of these showers that have worked across parts of the Northeast, New York to Washington, D.C., in and out of that shower activity. Some of it focused across the Appalachians, and then a whole mess of it, including some snow and some rain across the Great Lakes, specifically Michigan dealing with some of that this morning. And that's kind of the area that's going to see the bulk of those snow showers, at least through the first half of the day. We do see some of those downwind of the lakes and in interior areas of the Northeast as the day goes on, and especially in the higher elevations. We're also going to see some showers and thunderstorms centered across the Northeast as the afternoon goes on. So umbrella going to be needed for folks across that area. We've got some wind alerts, too. We've added Washington, D.C. to this, so notice those winds will be elevated. 12 million people included in this. Altoona, Roanoke, Washington, D.C., all included in that wind advisory through the later parts of today. Temperature-wise, a tale of two sides of the country, really. We've got the warm weather focused out west, where temperatures are running 5 to 10 degrees above normal, so 70s for Denver, for Rapid City, for Cedar City. Mild conditions for sure, and then warm, really, for Phoenix. 94 degrees for your high today. We, of course, have been dealing with the warmth across that region for multiple days now, and today is going to be no different. The east, on the other hand, running cooler than normal. So 48 degrees is all you're going to get in Green Bay today. We've got high 50s on tap for Indianapolis. Memphis ends up into those upper 60s. Tomorrow, more of the same, really. The west will stay warm. The east stays below normal. Pittsburgh going to be running 15 degrees below normal for this time of year. We're going to hit just a high of 57 degrees in Chicago, 53 for New York. But then some nicer, more mild conditions kind of settle in as the week goes on, specifically as we get into Friday and Saturday across the Northeast. 70s on Friday in Baltimore, headed to the low 80s. We'll see Saturday bring us 73 degrees in Boston, upper 70s even across parts of the Midwest. We've got 79 for Friday in Cincinnati and 80s both Thursday and Friday for Springfield. So if you're looking for the warmer weather, it will eventually get here. We just got to wait a little while. We do have a severe threat, though, that we're going to track on Thursday and Friday. This is a look at Thursday. Wind gusts going to be that main threat that we watch, and it's centered across Des Moines. Not an incredibly large area, but something to note. That area does expand, though, as we get into the end of the work week. This is a look at Friday. 40 million people included in that severe risk from Texas to Michigan, including St. Louis, Detroit, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Tulsa. Wind gusts also main threat, but we'll see some hail, maybe a couple of tornadoes possible, so it'll be something that we'll want to watch for otherwise as we head into the weekend. And I know it's Tuesday, but why not talk about the weekend? We've got springtime warmth for the East, guys, a little mountain snow for the Rockies, and then Saturday, those showers and thunderstorms will stretch from the Northeast to Texas, but sunny and warm for our friends in the Southeast.
That's good.
Yes. Right. Do you see how I ended on something positive?
I love that. After taxes and tornadoes, we'll take the weekend.
You're welcome.
Certain death taxes and snow this time of year. All right, thank you. Much more to come here on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, we are talking taxes more. Today's the day to get those returns in, but for folks in a handful of states, you do have a little more time to file. We're going to explain.
But first, after the break, an NBC News exclusive. We're taking you inside an anti-vaccine autism summit with a notable speaker, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's coming up next. Back now with new details about a deadly missile strike in Ukraine that killed 35 people. President Trump called the attack by Russia a mistake, then blamed both Zelensky and Putin for a wider war. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons brings us the latest.
The devastation from Russia's deadliest missile strikes this year. Captured on video. In the city of Sumy, rescue workers racing to pull people to safety after 2 Russian ballistic missiles tore into the city, killing 35 people and injuring 117 others, Ukraine says. Body bags lining the streets. This woman says she was in her apartment when the explosion wave threw her around, injuring her. The deadly assault coming just days after President Trump's Russia envoy, Steve Witkoff, spent more than 4 hours with President Putin in St. Petersburg, discussing what the Kremlin called a Ukraine settlement. President Trump saying Russia's attack was a mistake.
I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake.
Trump blaming both sides for the ongoing war in Ukraine.
That's a war that should have never been allowed to start, and Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
Many other Trump officials condemning the killings. His Ukraine envoy saying it crosses any line of decency. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling it horrifying. A video live stream of a church service being held in the city captured the moment the strikes hit. A local Ukrainian mayor saying a military award ceremony was planned in the region, calling that a pretense for 2 strikes on a civilian area, one following another. Ukrainian officials accusing Russia of using cluster munitions. Sumy is close to the Russian region of Kursk, where NBC News reported last month.
The Russian military can appreciate being filmed, but believe me, there are a lot of troops there.
Moscow may be preparing for a major offensive in the region, analysts warn, even as the Trump administration talks peace. President Zelensky saying what is missing right now is pressure on the aggressor, adding Russia is not afraid. But in an interview with 60 Minutes, recorded before the strikes, relitigating his clash with Vice President Vance in the Oval Office.
I have been to...
Accusing Vance of somehow justifying Putin's actions while inviting the president to visit Ukraine to see the impact of the war.
Come, look, and then let's move with a plan how to finish the war. You will understand with whom you have a deal.
All right, thanks to Keir Simmons for that report. You'll remember last week, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told President Trump he would uncover the so-called autism epidemic by September of this year. Experts quickly attacked the statement, with a senior vaccine official saying it gave families affected false hope.
Well, since then, Mr. Kennedy has addressed the second annual Autism Health Summit in San Diego, a forum where many of the attendees hold anti-vaccine views. Appearing in a pre-recorded video, he praised the summit's organizers as, quote, dear friends, and promised a future where autism is rare.
One of the attendees at this summit was NBC News senior reporter Brandy Zadrozny. Brandy is here with us. So before we get into the summit, let's just start with the science and build that foundation. Remind us what is believed to cause autism and why has this link with vaccines been debunked?
So we don't know exactly what causes autism, which is true for many diseases, schizophrenia, MS. There's lots of diseases we don't know the cause of. But for autism, we think, like other diseases, it's genetic mostly, and then it might be some environmental factors, some early development factors. Scientists are still working on it. They've been working on it for 80 years, and we still don't quite know. What we do know, because there's been such a loud, boisterous voice from the anti-vaccine community, is that vaccines don't cause autism. It has been litigated in courts. It has been litigated in the science. There have been dozens and dozens of studies in Japan, in Denmark, in the USA that show it just doesn't happen. But because science doesn't really work to prove something isn't happening, it's sort of still out there and will probably always be.
So this summit didn't have an option for media coverage on his website. So I'm curious how you were able to get inside and what views and people did you encounter?
Well, I've covered this for a long time, and in the past, a lot of these events would kick reporters out, and this one didn't have a press option, so I signed up with my real name. I wore my badge that said my name on it, signed up with my NBC email address, and then I gave out business cards to everyone I knew. So people sort of knew I was there. And no one seemed to mind, and I will say everyone was really lovely. The problem is that what I experienced in the audience is that I was sitting with a bunch of people who wanted something to be true and were willing to part with all of their money and all of their time and put all of their hope into this thing that we just know is demonstrably false. When they saw Kennedy on the screen, you know, this is their savior. This is the man who promised all, and now he's promising September. It was... not only did I see a lot of bad science, but I just saw a lot of false hope, and it was very sad.
Yeah, you've been covering RFK Jr. for many years now, and he's been tied to groups like this for a long time. Talk more about how people there are viewing him right now.
Well, these people are used to seeing RFK Jr. at their events. He would speak at them all the time, yearly autism conferences. He would go and speak. It was at these conferences that he made some of his wildest accusations against CDC, NIH, FDA, claiming that they were, at one point, he called them Nazi prison guards. Another point, he said that they were like Catholic Church priests abusing children all nationwide, and everyone was covering it up. At this conference, he had an American flag, he had the HHS logo in his video, and he was a little bit muted, but he did say, you know, basically, I promise you that by September, we will make autism rare. And so that sort of suggests to me that he said he's going to find the cause of autism and he's going to cure it in a little over a season, which is quite the promise to make to these folks.
Yeah, 4 or 5 months. It's an incredible feat if it happens. So in your article, you say these types of gatherings are on the rise. You write, while they may advertise different themes, there's a shared belief system among them, a rejection of mainstream science, skepticism about the government, and loud complaints that the powerful are hiding something from the everyday American. So you've covered this for quite some time. How have you seen these conspiracy theories grow? And do you think that they will continue to spread perhaps even further with Kennedy's position in the administration?
Well, I tell you this, I used to cover this and people would say, why are you covering this? Why are you going to this niche conference with a couple hundred parents? It doesn't matter. Like, you're just giving these people a platform. Well, now, as they said at this place, you know, COVID really did supercharge these theories. And now you have the anti-vaxxer in chief as the head of all of our public health. We're seeing what that does. We're seeing vaccine rates for childhood diseases tank. We're seeing measles outbreaks. We've seen 2 dead little girls in Texas. So the effect that it has already been seen. It's only been a couple of months. And like, you know, he's promised September. When September comes around, he's going to have to answer. And all of his followers think that he already knows what that answer would be. The impact of anti-vaccine rhetoric coming out of the HHS, the premier public health agency in the world, arguably, that's dangerous.
Brandy, we appreciate your reporting as always. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. All right.
Well, coming up, fighting the fakes.
After the break, an urgent new warning from the FDA on those popular weight loss drugs like Ozempic. Why patients need to check if they're getting the real thing. The doctor is in next.
Kristen Welker hosts Meet the Press every Sunday on NBC.
News lives in the now.
Look at this. You can't even see anything anymore.
Let's break down what we know.
You gotta see this.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
NBC News Daily. Weekdays from 12 to 4 on NBC News Now.
We're back now with a new warning from the FDA about counterfeit Ozempic.
The agency is urging patients and doctors to double-check prescriptions after hundreds of fake versions were found in the U.S. The FDA says people should only get Ozempic with a valid prescription through state-licensed pharmacies.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel is here with everything we need to know about this one. Dr. Patel, good morning to you. So the fake Ozempic that the FDA seized were 1 milligram injections. Do we know how it got on the market, and how can people make sure they have the real thing?
Yeah, so what we know, Stephen, is that these entered the United States through outside channels, meaning these are fake products, along with everything from fake needles to just the entire kind of box supply were fake. The fake products, or at least all that the FDA knows about, were seized several days ago, but there still may be some circulating, and that's why the FDA, along with Novo Nordisk, have put out this warning. And there are, you'll hopefully see it on the screen, the counterfeit products have a specific lot number and serial number, just to warn people. It can be confusing to look for lot, serial numbers. So when in doubt, look on the FDA website or even get in touch with your local pharmacy. You can bring it to your local pharmacy, even if you didn't fill it there, and they can kind of tell you if the products are fake.
What are the symptoms? What could happen if someone does take fake Ozempic?
So far, what we've seen with the symptoms of fake products like Ozempic have been some of the symptoms that you can see with the real products. So some nausea, some GI illness. But there have been some cases that can be more severe. That's why we're putting out this warning and just wanting to warn consumers. So you can see everything from having no effect. If you've been used to taking the drug and you're like, gosh, this week something's off, it just doesn't feel like it's working, that could be a sign that potentially it's a compromised product. And you can also have incredibly serious side effects like infections, because as I mentioned, even those needles have not been verified. That can cause a serious risk of skin infection, and that can lead to more serious disease.
And looking at Ozempic more broadly, weight loss still considered an off-label use for it. So for people interested in taking it for that reason, what should they know about any potential long-term effects?
Yeah, so Ozempic itself, the brand name that we've been talking about and what we're concerned about with being compromised in the drug supply, that drug itself does not have a weight loss indication. It has the same chemical and packaged and with a different indication called Wegovy. That is actually used for weight loss and can be prescribed for weight loss. What we're finding, Stephen and Joe, is that most people are having problems getting their insurance companies to pay for this because many insurance companies don't pay for weight loss drugs yet. That includes Medicare. Long-term side effects, though, talk to your doctor. They can be these GI side effects, and it can also have some other side effects if you don't have enough weight to lose. I've warned people, this is not the drug for you to lose 5 pounds. This is a long-term drug, really help with cardiometabolic disorders.
Important information. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you.
Months after Princess Kate announced that she is in remission from cancer, she's sharing a new video, and it focuses on a source of strength for her during her difficult health battle, Mother Nature. The royal is now sharing videos and photos where the great outdoors are heavily featured, and in a new short film, she opens up and talks about the peace that it brings her.
Hello, sorry to break in.
How are you all doing? Good?
In a new video released by Kensington Palace, the Princess of Wales passionately embraces nature.
I find it a very spiritual and very intense, emotional reconnection, I suppose, these environments.
In the short film, Princess Kate shares her personal thoughts and connection with the environment with a group of young scouts.
Not everyone has that same relationship, perhaps, with nature, but it is so therefore meaningful for me as a place to balance and find a sort of sense of peace and reconnection in what is otherwise a very busy world.
The princess's remarks come after recent posts about nature, like this photo taken by her son, Prince George, and shared on World Cancer Day in February.
The cancer journey is complex, scary, and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you.
Last year, in a video featuring the princess spending time with her family in the English countryside, she announced she had completed chemotherapy and would be returning to royal duties.
What's changed in her language when she talks about getting out into nature is how it affects her very personally and spiritually. Getting close to nature, being out in nature was something that helped her recovery.
Despite recent health battles for Kate and the King, some members of the royal family are stepping back into the spotlight. Prince William and his son George seen last Wednesday at a soccer match in Paris, cheering on their team Aston Villa. That same week, King Charles and Queen Camilla met with the Pope during a 4-day state visit to Italy.
Look how hilly it is over here.
The princess is now in remission from her undisclosed cancer and looking ahead to the future. It will be a busy weekend for the King and Queen with various events over the Easter holiday. That includes the traditional service at Windsor Castle on Sunday. Many are waiting to see if William and Kate join them this year. Odds are good that will happen. They did miss last year. It was shortly after Kate's diagnosis, so they stayed in their private country home. All right, well, coming up, it's Tuesday, but as we've noted this morning, it's not your ordinary run-of-the-mill Tuesday.
Yeah, it's tax day in America, and if you haven't filed your returns yet, don't fret, because after the break, we're digging into why some people in some states have a little more time to get it all done. This is Morning News Now.
We're back with your friendly reminder. Today is tax day, the deadline for most Americans to file their 2024 tax returns.
Yeah, but depending on where you live, you might have a little more time to file and pay. That's because the IRS is now giving automatic extensions to people in FEMA-designated areas that were affected by natural disasters last year.
Mark Stever, friend of the show, joins us now. He's the Chief Tax Information Officer at Jackson Hewitt. Mark, good to have you with us on your big holiday. Happy Tax Day to you.
It's a happy tax day for all Americans. It's a very important day.
Let's go through the states here. It's Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North and South Carolina. Those are the only states where all taxpayers did receive a deadline extension, but it also applies to several counties outside of those states. So for folks who still are figuring this out, how can you determine if you live in an eligible area, and what does that mean for their tax returns?
Yeah, it's an important point, and there's several fake stories out there, but you can always go to the IRS website. Google, or not Google, but use their search for the federal declared disaster areas. The FEMA website, it also has all of the federally declared disaster areas, and that's the important point. And you kind of know it if you've been in one, because you've been in one. And I'm in Florida, so we know where the federal declared disaster areas are. And it's typically by county and by zip code, and it does give you several options. The easiest of which is additional time to file and additional time to pay. But don't fall prey to that as the only benefit. There are many other tax benefits in the tax code, which sometimes is, maligned as being evil. But there's really good stuff in there if you've been economically hard hit by the disasters of 24, and there's no shortage of those.
So, Mark, for those of us who are not exempt and still haven't filed, what do you want them to know?
Well, you have to do something by midnight today. You have to file your tax return, which I recommend, or file an extension. But do not just ignore the deadline, because there's penalties, there's interest. You have to pay a pro to clean it up. And we've seen the escalation of employers and lenders and other accreditation certifiers now saying, hey, have you filed your taxes? And if you haven't, then they start looking upon you a little differently. So there's a lot embedded in the tax deadline, the easiest of which is 2 out of 3 people are getting a refund this year, and that's $300 billion. So why would you wait on that? But most importantly, you have to do something. File an extension if you need to. File a tax return. There's plenty of help, plenty of capacity in the system. Lots of folks out there are really excited, as Joe said, about this time of day. So you should have no problem finding some help.
If for whatever reason someone just does need more time to file, they need more time to pay if they think they owe, are there any options?
Oh, there's a host of options in the tax code. Some of the sitcoms have made fun of the IRS, but you have to take action. You can't just kick it down the road to June and say, well, now I'm ready to get started. So the first thing you need to do is find your documents, and then find a pro or do it yourself, whichever works for you, but get something, in the mail, because there's 2 or 3 big penalties. There's the failure to file penalty, 25% plus interest, and then there's a separate penalty for failure to pay, and there are others. But all you have to do to avoid the failure to file is file an extension or file your tax return. And even if you don't pay or can't pay or don't know some of the alternatives at IRS for putting you on an installment plan, at least you get that big penalty out of the way by going on record that you have a tax return due, and that's what the IRS wants. That's why that penalty is 25%. 5% a month. The other one's 25%, but only 0.5%. So the big penalty, failure to file, can be avoided. File something.
But Mark, we're almost out of time here, but we've heard so much about the mass layoffs at the IRS. Has that caused any delays that you're seeing in people maybe getting a refund?
No impact whatsoever. A lot of that's probably just hype. The reality is we've never seen refunds processing faster. If you've got a clean return, that is, the address is the same as the last time you filed, your bank account's the same, refunds are coming a lot faster than that 9 out of 10 in 21 days. And that's kind of the norm. But if your stuff's the same and you've got a clean one, we're seeing 10 days to 2 weeks and you'll get your money. Now, that's if you electronically file and electronically deposit. Another best practice on both fronts. Don't forget to do that when you file your stuff.
All right, Mark Stever, always good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Go get your money.
There it is. Well, more money news now. In a new trade escalation, China is now reportedly halting deliveries from Boeing.
CNBC's Savannah now has that and some other financial headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Joe, Stephen, good morning to you. Yes, so shares of Boeing are under pressure on reports. China has ordered its airlines to stop taking deliveries of new planes from the company as part of the trade war with the U.S. Now, Bloomberg says China has also asked airlines to halt purchases of aircraft equipment and parts from U.S. companies. President Trump has hiked tariffs on Chinese imports to 145%, and Beijing responded by raising tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. Nissan will reportedly cut production in Japan of its top-selling U.S. model, the Rogue SUV. That's between May and July, and that's due to tariffs on imported cars. Now, the U.S. is Nissan's top market, accounting for more than a quarter of sales last year, with most vehicles made in Japan or Mexico. And as you just had the conversation, it's tax day, and several chains are offering freebies and discounts. Krispy Kreme customers can buy a dozen donuts and get a second dozen for just the price of the sales tax in their state. Burger King is offering 1-cent cheeseburgers to its Royal Perks members with a purchase of $1 or more. Shake Shack customers can score a free single black truffle burger, black truffle shroom, or Parmesan fries with a purchase of $10.40 or more with the code truffle tax at checkout. 7-Eleven is offering $10.40 off delivery of any order of $20 or more with the code right off through its 7 Now app. And guys, let me tell you, my tech manager, Tyler, he already took advantage of this.
Oh,
take a look. Take a look.
That's
He
a good
already did.
choice.
He went and picked them up.
Okay. Happy tax day, Silvana.
Happy tax day, guys.
Well, coming up, we're feeling green this morning.
After the break, the worldwide celebrations taking over social media all over golfing phenom Rory McIlroy, fresh off his history-making win at the Masters over the weekend. That is next. Stay with us. We're back, and the future of women's basketball is looking bright after last night's WNBA draft. As expected, Paige Beckers was the #1 overall pick. The former UConn All-Star is heading south for a spot on the Dallas Wings. Beckers, no stranger to the spotlight. She capped off her college career just last week by leading the Huskies to win UConn's 12th NCAA title in women's basketball, the most of any school. But with the tidal wave of nerves and excitement that can come with draft night, the 23-year-old guard has a reputation for keeping things fun. Take a listen.
I'm mic'd up. I'm mic'd up. Do I have to get up and hug you again? No. Yeah!
Congrats, man.
Thanks, coach.
Congratulations to Paige and all the members of this year's WNBA rookie class. Worthy of celebration, Steve.
Absolutely. A lot of congratulations there.
It's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But your news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.